We are live.
All right. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us on Friday for the webinar, which will deal with issues of citizenship. Euh, je peux répondre en anglais et en français, comme vous le savez probablement. Euh, Ceci est le début. It's the beginning of what we hope will be a series of webinars that we'll be doing under the brand that we describe as U Metropolis, which has traditionally been our, at least for the past few years, our e-learning initiative, but we're transforming it into something broader so that it will constitute a sort of a learning center. I notice in my many conversations with some of you and with many other people that there's a lot that people don't understand about the immigration system, about how citizenship operates, about ways or pathways to enter the country. And then there's a variety of other issues involving the history of immigration to Canada, its evolution, its importance demographically, its importance culturally. So all that together and some polling we've done has led us to think that there's a good opportunity to create a hub, if you'd like, or learning center. And so what you're going to see today is the beginning or the, if you like, debut for one study on the issue around citizenship. But again, we're not unpacking citizenship in all its sort of forms here. Really, the webinar today is for people who have some coming in with some knowledge about citizenship and looking at sort of current issues and challenges associated with citizenship. So with that preamble, let me go to the presentation and we'll take questions after, ideally. So have I got it right? I think GV, PowerPoint slideshow. I don't know why it's doing that, but it's fine. Okay. Up we go. There we go. And we'll put it on the full screen. And we're good. Okay. So let's start with a bit of the background for on the topic and why I've come to this particular topic. Something I've been looking at a bit more closely of late. Some of you may have observed a lot of media focus on the issue about the extension to Americans with Canadian heritage or ancestry beyond first generation to obtain Canadian citizenship and the spike in interest that the media was reporting with respect to Americans doing requests or searches to trace their eligibility for citizenship. Of course, that doesn't translate into Americans moving to Canada necessarily. And I have noticed when I've been speaking to a lot of people, this is anecdotal, that uh, in Canada as well, there are people looking into opportunities to acquire second citizenship if they have European or other background that enables citizenship, second citizenship acquisition, which, with an EU passport makes for better mobility opportunities. So there's a lot of talk about those types of opportunities. And to that end, I thought that this would be an interesting topic. And so I'm going to share three different sources of data with you to give us a sort of round view of what the conversation looks like with respect to dual citizenship. I'll look at census data from 2021 to share with you who the dual citizens are in Canada, that is to say, from which countries they emanate predominantly, both in terms of percentages and in terms of the real numbers of dual citizens. Then we'll look at some of the recent IRCC data, which I've been updating the past few days to February 2026 to see who's applying to come to Canada, how those numbers have evolved, who's applying for citizenship, and how those numbers have evolved. Always keeping in mind that we have, of course, seen some reductions or cuts to both permanent residents and to temporary migrants to Canada. And so that'll be reflected in some of the numbers. And then I'll close with some public opinion survey data that we commissioned to the Association for Canadian Studies from December of 2025 around attitudes towards dual citizenship. So that's what this is going to be about. And Away we go. So, if you've read the background while I was chatting, not all countries allow dual citizenship where it's permitted. It enables someone, as we know, to hold two nationalities at the same time without losing any rights. Some people hold three citizenship, uh, can hold as many as three citizenships. But we're focusing on dual here. By becoming dual citizen or dual national, you can benefit from access to countries' social and health care services, perhaps unevenly in some regards, avoid visa restrictions to a great degree, and hold two passports for greater global mobility. However, at the same time, you might face legal and tax obligations in the countries in which you're citizens. While exact global rankings are difficult to obtain, the US, Canada, Switzerland, and many EU nations have high rates of dual citizenship, with Canada reporting 11.2% or 3.7 million dual citizens. That's a 2021 number. This said, debates about dual citizenship, right, sorry. Right. That said, debates about dual citizenship are rising globally and have been generated by an increase in country acceptance. And to that end, we're seeing some high-profile legislative pushback more recently in the United States and elsewhere. I'll show you the survey from Leger Marketing at the end. There's a bit of a summary of that survey, but I'd rather show you the data results than just describe for you, what it's telling us. So, oops, next. Why am I not moving here? No, oop, I went too far. Okay, back. So the growing interest in dual citizenship, as I said, there's a growing interest in dual citizenship reflects a bigger shift in how people now think about nationality. For generations, passports primarily signaled where someone came from. Today, they also shape people's travel, work, and where we live. Until recently, until relatively recently, many countries restricted or prohibited dual citizenship, making multiple passports less common than they are today. However, with geopolitical tensions, pandemic border closures, and shifting visa regimes, reshaping global mobility and remote work fueling growing population as sort of digital nomads, a second passport's become an increasingly interesting option. I've taken this citation from a BBC travel article on the rise of what people are calling backup passports. Right, and that's in fact the way the some media has described Americans' interest in securing Canadian passports for those who may be eligible as sort of backup passports or creating second options for persons. Many European countries, as I said, allow dual citizenship, while nations in Asia and the Middle East prohibit it. Although 76% of countries allow dual citizenship with the US, some are tightening access to manage security and integration concerns. Despite some tightening, some countries like Germany only recently began allowing dual citizenship, in this case in June 2024. This is just a list of which countries allow or don't allow. So Japan, China, India, and Singapore continue to enforce strict single citizenship policies, often requiring the renunciation of foreign citizenship. France has language and integration requirements around citizenship. Sweden is proposing to extend residency requirements to 7 years. Italy has reduced the number of generations allowed for citizenship claims, etc. And we've recently seen in the UK, which has affected a fair number of Canadians, that dual citizens can't use their ETAs, their electronic travel authorizations, and must have British passports to enter the UK. If you don't hold a British passport, you must obtain a certificate of entitlement, or certificate of entitlement to rights of a boat costing about £600, etc. So we are seeing that was a very recent measure introduced by the UK. So as I said, the risk is we'll see some pushback going forward, depending on how this phenomenon evolves in future. These are the numbers from 2021. So I've calculated this from the Census in terms of the percentage of dual citizens, right, in Canada by place of birth. Bulgaria being the largest at 81% of the persons born in Bulgaria that are living in Canada that are dual citizens. Romania, 74%, Taiwan, 70%, Poland, 66%, Switzerland, Algeria, Lebanon, Moldova, Morocco, Uruguay, Pakistan, Argentina, Israel, Colombia, and Peru. So those are the highest percentage of dual citizenship holders. Now, in real numbers, however, you get a different picture here, right? So the highest number, the top 20 dual citizens in this country, you could see the UK is number one at 229,000, about 230,000, US about 180,000. That's of the 3.7 million, as I said earlier, that are dual citizens. Canada, country number three, dual citizenship holders, Pakistan, Iran, Hong Kong next, Poland, Philippines, France, Lebanon, right, Romania, India, etc. So next. Now we're just getting into some of the numbers, a big drop in numbers of new citizens to Canada between 2024 and 2025. Although Afghanistan was an important exception. These are source countries, new Canadian citizens by numbers of persons by month. I've kind of just restricted the comparison instead of going back to 2015 to the last few years. So from 2023 to 2026 February, right? That's the most recent data made available, just to follow a bit of the trend line. So in terms of new Canadian citizens, we can see that in 2023, 380,000 new Canadian citizens. There were 380,000 new Canadian citizens. 2024, 375, so not a big reduction, but a bigger reduction in 2025, also reflecting to some degree the reductions that we are aware of. It was a 12, almost a, well, calculated out, 380, about I say, yeah, sort of a little over 25% decrease, right, in the numbers of new Canadian citizens. And from January 2025 to January 2026 was 23,000. So we're now at 27 for the month of February. Sort of, I noticed citizenship numbers when I looked on a month-to-month basis don't fluctuate tremendously. So the 27,000 probably gets you over 300,000 for 2026 if the trending continues. We have seen some reductions, right, between 2024 and 2020. Well, rather, the reductions are reflected pretty much across the proverbial board for 2024 to 2025 in terms of the sources of new Canadian citizens. You can see India down by 17,000, but went up 77, 87, back down to 69,000. Philippines here also about a 20% decrease there. Actually a little more than 20%, 25%. Not so much for Nigeria. Increase in Afghanistan, new citizens from Afghanistan. China, substantial decrease for China. Pakistan decrease as well, and not much so much of an increase in the United States. Pretty flat actually in terms of Americans. Slight decrease for Iran. Some other decreases here. France, not a big decrease there. Brazil, a big decrease actually. Syria, big decrease there. Vietnam, decrease there. So decreases not unevenly. Some countries pretty flat. Haiti, an increase. So some changes, uneven although. Now we're looking at applications for PR status, also down substantially. No surprise there given the reductions, right? So, and the decline continued into February 26th, with Cameroon being an important exception in terms of applications for PR status. We can see here it was 567 2023, went to 658 2024, dropped back to 441 in 2025. Slight decrease here month to month. It's very hard on a month-to-month basis to sort of make any firm conclusions. It's too early in the calendar year to draw any conclusions. I did offer the comparison in January 2025 and January 2026. That's a over 20% decrease, but we'll have to wait to see what happens over the course of the year. Having said that, there were big decreases here, obviously, from 2024 to 2025, particularly from India, right? In terms of applications for PR status, that's very large cut, right? Here from 151 to 78, almost over almost 40, about 45%. Nigeria cut there about 20%. Increase, as I said, from Cameroon, substantial increase from Cameroon. Hong Kong, an increase there. Algeria, small decrease. Big cut from China, also 50% reduction from China, 50% reduction from Philippines. Increase in the Ivory Coast, large reduction from Iran. Flat, relatively flat, not a big reduction from France. Pakistan, fairly significant reduction. Big reduction from Ukraine, although, we've seen, I think, the big push from Ukraine in terms of PR applications in 2024, right? So that's not happening here. So that's where the changes are there. Applications for PR status, just continuing same trend. These are other countries in terms of applications for PR status. I didn't do the February for that for the for those countries, so but it's available. Uh, these are study permits. I didn't do the study permits for February either. They're available. The data is available. But just to give an idea in terms of study permits, there we've seen new study permits 2023 to 2025 reduction use issued down over 70%. So that's a very, very substantial change, as we see reflected in the cuts to university enrollments. 860 goes down to 578, down to 282 for 2025, and still continuing that drop. If we compare January this year to January last year, we're looking at sort of continued reductions in terms of new study permits issued, right? We can see that India saw a massive reduction in new study permits issued from 306,000 to 49,000 for 2025. Right? These are applications processed by RC for new study permits. Right? So, as well, Nigeria, big cuts across the board, very few exceptions. Here's one. Senegal, actually, not as big a cut from Senegal, at least not from 2023 to 2025. Very big cut from the Philippines. Cameroon, there's a substantial cut. So really across the board in terms of those study permits, Congo, very, very, Haiti, not as much. France, not as much. So the French-speaking countries actually not encountering as large a cut as these other countries are encountering, which are 50% or more. Next. Source country, these are authorizations and visas issued for permanent residents, January 2023 to February. This is by the way, it's in order of the countries that were most likely to, rather than the highest numbers of applications or in this case, excuse me, of authorizations and visas issued for PR status, right? Or for permanent residents, rather. So here, also seeing the reduction from 2023, 2024, big reduction here in 2025. That's from 24 to 25, down 25%. Again, India, the largest source of one of the larger sources of the reductions, 25% reduction there. Philippines, not so, but the bigger reductions 2024 to 2025 was a jump from 23 to 24. Yeah, that's it. So pretty much here, Cameroon, no reduction there. Actually, it's slight increase there. Eritrea, there's a reduction. France, an increase. Again, French-speaking countries, more of an increase. Ukraine, an increase in those authorizations and visas issued, right? So, United States, a reduction, etc. So. Next, source country authorization. So this is just a continuation. Colombia, Vietnam were amongst the larger declines in those authorizations and visas issued for PRs 24 to 25, just to give you an idea there. Right, I don't want to belabor this too much. So let's see. If we look here, 24 to 25, not a major cut from persons from Algeria. And as I said, Colombia, the big cut, 10,080 to 5630. That's a very substantial cut. And Vietnam is here at the bottom, actually. So yeah, 66.95 went down to 38.75. So larger cut there. Some other modest cuts, but that's what it looks like. Okay. Declines in new application extensions, 15, 20% annually. These are new applications and extensions approved by RCC for temporary residents. And now we're just getting to the temporary residents. All this is just to give you an idea of who's coming to the country or who seeks to come to the country, as well as who's trying to secure citizenship. So that's what these last sort of 7 or 8 slides are intended to share with you. So here, declines in new application extensions approved by 15, 20% annually. So there was a decrease here from 23 to 24, another decrease from 24 to 25 in new application extensions for temporary residents. Big source was India still, right? Went from 1.2, 1.1, 771, very substantial decrease. in those applications and extensions that were approved by RCC. China also decreased here, 411 to 329, about 20, it's at about 25, 20 to 25%. And smaller here, not a decrease, not a major decrease from Nigeria, at least from 24 to 25. Philippines, substantial cuts. So those countries that have been the largest sources of our immigration, both permanent and temporary, are also the object of the largest cuts, which in some to some degree isn't counterintuitive. If you're going to project important cuts, then presumably the proportion of those cuts will come from your largest sources of migration. And for the better part of the last, I guess, 15, 20 years, it has been India, China, and the Philippines that have been the major sources of immigration to Canada. I'm not, the data doesn't suggest that that is necessarily shifting, at least in percentage terms, right? Because you can see overall, for example, if you look at the month of January of 2026, 249 sort of applications and extensions approved. Still, about 30% are from, a third are from India, right? So you go back here, it's still in percentage terms. Here it's about a third in 2024. Here it's not quite a third. So despite the cuts, the percentage in terms of where we're receiving most of the applications and extensions, if you like, from are still from India, if you wish, right? So, and even China, the percentages haven't declined as much, but the real numbers decline quite substantially, which, as I said, makes sense in terms of the math. When you're projecting cuts, you've got to assume those cuts will come disproportionately from those countries with the largest, that are the largest sources of migration. So we're not seeing necessarily a shift, or at least not an important one, in those larger sources of migration that continue to, if you like, contribute to our sort of evolving demographics, at least from the standpoint of what diversity looks like in the country and the various layers of our diversity. It's just the overall numbers are not as significant. Source country, new application extensions received for, these are applications and extensions received, that they're requests, right? So they're not here, they're not approved, they're received. I thought this was an interesting statistic. I've actually been trying to sort of unpack it a bit more by getting a better idea of how many people we are admitting, have been admitted versus how many applications we've received. Because when you sort of go online to try to search this out, it keeps bringing you back to the number of temporary residents that are currently in the country. Whereas this is a kind of accumulation of the applications, which include, as you can see at the bottom, resident visas, visitor records, study permits, study permit extensions, work permits, and work permit extensions. So the accumulation of all that is quite substantial, right? So, and I think it sort of signifies this sort of very high interest from persons from various parts of the world to come to the country, right? So here you got, for, even though you've seen a substantial reduction in these applications and extensions, which, not unpacking the numbers necessarily, but you're seeing that change here, 6.3, 5.8, now 4.4. Still on track if you do this sort of monthly average, which I would sort of suggest caution about that. But if you multiply this by 12, right, you're still on track for the 4 million or thereabouts, right? Or right, 4.4 over 4 million. So consistent with what you've seen here in terms of the degree of interest, at least, that this reflects in coming to Canada, and still quite a bit of interest from India, from China, in proportions similar to those the proportions being admitted from those countries. So I still think if we're looking at the future, we're not seeing, although with some exceptions, we're seeing some greater admission and interest from persons in Francophone, French-speaking countries that we've seen reflected, but by and large, these numbers here still reflect that our principal sources for receiving migrants and potential migrants showing interest are from a lot of the same countries, right? There have been some changes. You can see here, for example, in Bangladesh, there was quite a substantial decrease in Bangladeshis expressing interest or whatever, or putting applications, almost a 50% reduction. And then there's, I guess, more insights to be provided about some of the countries where there have been sort of problems identified with the applications. So, which also I noticed because I did some research looking at which universities admitted persons from particular countries, and some of the universities are disproportionately affected were the ones that admitted potential applicants from countries where there were some challenges associated with the applications. So that's part of the explanation. Now to just get you on the closing part of this is just on public opinion on issues on citizenship. So I would like to hold citizenship in more than one country. Now that's not me saying that, by the way. That's the survey question. I might like to hold citizenship in more than one country, but you know what? I probably would answer no to that question. I'm perfectly happy with my Canadian citizenship, although if it's going to help my kids to get entry and make entry or mobility easier for them in some other country, I suppose it might be something to consider. But I'd probably answer no on that question. But in any event, but the substantial percentage of Canadians answer yes, right? At 37%, 47% said no, 60% say I don't know. Now, if we take that all together, right, then you don't have a majority of Canadians firmly saying, no, I only like to hold Canadian citizenship. You've got a substantial percentage that either saying I'd like to hold more than one or I don't know. So let's see how that shakes out across the regions of the country. Well, let's see. No. So the no is highest in Atlantic Canada, right? And the yes lowest in Atlantic Canada. Quebec, the no is also reasonably high, right? And Alberta. So those are the places where it's highest, and where the no is also, rather the yes is lowest. Although Manitoba and Saskatchewan, the yes is also not especially low. It's just more people don't know. It's BC that's a bit is quite different, right? People in BC would like to hold more than one citizenship to the tune of 46%, 34 no, 20 say they don't know. And that might have to do with the composition of the BC population. So could be a variety of reasons for it. But it's the only part of the country that's showing the reverse trend on this question right here. Yeah, we'd have to probe that further. I could probe it further, actually. So I also broke down the question by immigrant, non-immigrant, and by vis minority status or racialized status, so to speak. So non-immigrant, that's born in Canada, 35% say yes, 50% say no. Immigrants are more likely to say they would like to hold citizenship in more than one country, right? Persons who are white, no, that's aligned with the non-immigrant. Vis minorities, racialized persons, 44% yes, 35% no. So again, looks a bit like the BC figure. South Asian, South Asian 44-24, right? So it's a bit more complex than the South Asian case in India, right? In terms of the dual citizenship issue, right? Because India offers a kind of special pass or special. Someone could explain this better to me, I suppose, who's on the call, but there's some special provision for persons from India, even though they're not a country that engages in dual citizenship, whatever, or enables or facilitates dual citizenship. China, persons that are of Chinese origin, 46-42, so more yes than no. In the Middle East, much more yes than no. And we saw the numbers of persons in some of the Middle Eastern countries at the outset that are holding dual citizenship, so to significant degrees. People who are citizens of Canada and another country, dual citizens, are less loyal to Canada than those who are citizens of Canada only. So no, 41%. Yes, 31% think that there are loyalty issues that might arise from holding dual citizenship. So I just thought that was an interesting question, So young people are more likely to say no to that than are persons in the older age cohorts that are more divided on the issue. Right. So you can see the division of the issue emerges at 55 plus on whether there's some loyalty question involved in this thing. But those who feel 55 and under do not feel that that's as much an issue. A fair number of persons say they don't know. Okay. Yes. On the loyalty issue again. So pretty, except for Albertans. Albertans are the outliers on this. They're the ones that think more so than any other Canadians that there may be some loyalty issues involved with holding dual citizenship. The rest of the country doesn't think so, as you can see. So, although, it's not as the percentage difference isn't massive, right, in terms of the no versus yes. It's a 10-point difference, 12, 9. So some feeling about that, Yeah, same question for immigrants. No, non-immigrants more likely to be divided on the issue than immigrants. Uh, and the two communities that where the numbers in the poll were significant enough for me to share the results with you are, here more than a 2-to-1 ratio. The answer is no among South Asian Canadians, Canadians of Chinese background, right? Also, substantially more inclined to say no than yes to that issue. Right. Now, I just did a correlation here. I'd like to hold citizenship in more than one country, and people who are citizens of Canada are less loyal to Canada than those who are citizens of Canada only. So you do the sort of crosstab here. There is a bit of a difference. People who say no, they don't want to hold citizenship more than one other country are 38% more likely to think there's a loyalty issue. The people who say no, right? Uh, I would like to hold citizenship more than one country. No, I don't. Uh, excuse me. I like those. Yes, they would. Excuse me. Yes, they would. Right. Are less likely to think there's a loyalty issue. Almost again 20 25-point gap. So the people who say yes, they'd like to be dual citizens. They could are much less likely to think there's a loyalty issue. Uh, right. So here, then I asked, I'd rather be a citizen of Canada than any country in the world. And 81% of respondents agreed with that, including 83% of the persons born in Canada in the survey, 74% born outside of Canada. I'd rather be a citizen of Canada than any other country in the world. This was a survey done in 2025. Oh, okay. So here was this, sorry, that was 2023. Actually, in 2025, even though there's a modification to the question, which requires we be a little prudent about the results, and I'll need to test it further. But there is a reduction. There has been a reduction in the extent to which people are saying they'd rather be a citizen of Canada than any other country in the world, although still a majority say they would like to be. Here, you could see that it's at least 2 years ago, the percentage saying making that statement was higher. And here I did the comparison, right? Right. So in this one here, I'd rather be a citizen of Canada than other country in the world. 2023, Quebec 79%, Atlantic 84, 80, 84, 70, 73. So 2025, there's a reduction in the percentage saying that they'd rather be a citizen of Canada than other country in the world, although there was a slight question modification that may affect the results. Right. So, and I did the net. I also did the same question way by, excuse me, broken down. Rather, I broke down the results by age for the same question. And you can see the big gap is here amongst the youngest cohort, 18 to 24. That's a substantial change or substantial drop in affirming you'd like rather be citizen of Canada than other country. No substantial change for 65, no substantial difference in the 65 plus cohort. So the change between 2023 and 2025 in a 2.5 year period is really largely reflected here in the under 45 group, not in the over 45 group, right? As you can see in terms of their interest in being citizens of Canada and any other country. What that means for the future, we'll have to see, where there's a lot more opportunity for global mobility today, and what it all means will require, I suppose, further research going forward. So, not bad, about 30 minutes. Alors, pour résumer, en fait, il y a 3 choses que j'ai tenté à présenter ou à montrer lors de la présentation. D'abord, on a commencé avec toute la question autour de la citoyenneté double, On a regardé les nombres des Canadiens qui détiennent la citoyenneté double ainsi que le pourcentage par pays de ceux qui détiennent ce genre de citoyenneté ou des citoyennetés. Là, on a vu les chiffres pour les pays sources des citoyennes admises au Canada ainsi que des personnes approuvées pour le résidence permanente et des extensions pour les résidences temporaires, ainsi que le nombre de personnes qui appliquent. Et là, j'ai terminé avec des résultats d'une enquête d'opinion faite pour le compte de l'Association d'études canadiennes pour par Léger Marketing, pour montrer un peu les attitudes en termes de la double citoyenneté. D'abord, l'intérêt auprès des Canadiens de obtenir la double citoyenneté et le degré auquel ceci est perçu comme mené à des questions de loyauté ou pas, ainsi que le désir de être citoyen du Canada, plus que d'être citoyen de notre pays au monde, où justement on a vu une évolution lors de la période où j'ai posé la question antérieurement, c'est-à-dire février-mars 2023, où on voit, notamment chez les jeunes ou les moins de 45 ans, un moindre intérêt à être citoyen du Canada que d'autres pays du monde, comparé à ce qu'on a vu auparavant. Alors, c'est un peu ça pour résumer ce que était présenté. Et avec ça, with that said, comments, questions, suggestions for future area of research, suggestions for future webinar themes. All those would be welcome from the persons who have generously taken the time over their lunch hour to get some sort of insight into how certain things are evolving with respect to citizenship and migration, respectively, and or may evolve. Uh, Let me also take this opportunity to do a short advertisement for a forthcoming conference, which will be the Metropolis Identity Summit. It'll be in Niagara Falls, October 22nd to 23rd. And citizenship is one of the themes, and I think the 6 or 7 themes that we're looking to uh, uh, sort of support more conversation about. That will be the one that is open to submissions and interest from you or anyone else that you suggest might want to come. I would move soon on the Niagara Falls call because we're already getting interest and in Halifax, actually, thanks to many of you, we actually, I think, set a record in terms of attendance at 1,200. That's not the case, will not be the case in Niagara Falls because our capacity is about 500. But, the sooner that you express interest, probably the better in terms of that summit or forum. I thought it was important to position the issues in terms of the theme of restoring trust, which we're going to be doing more research around in the fall, and looking at issues of unity in the country because in my home province here in Quebec, there will be elections and unity issues will be on the table. And I get the sense in Alberta there are also issues around unity that are on the table. And so I thought that that issue alongside our immigration issues and settlement integration issues and looking at how that shakes out more broadly would be a good opportunity for us uh, to convene and present findings and discuss what this implies. I also should mention that the co-chairs for the Niagara Falls Conference will be Elise Herzig from JIAS and Ahmed Hussein from TNO in both in Toronto. What else can I add? Yeah, and also we will be doing, although we're very preliminary stage at this point, a Metropolis Diasporas Forum in Delhi. I believe it'll be next February, tentatively. And it will be an opportunity to look at migration issues between Canada and India in particular, and effects of in terms of diaspora relations uh, in as regards India's Indian presence in the country. So a very topical theme that needs more insight and research and examination. as you can observe from the numbers that I shared with with all of you uh, just yes, a few minutes earlier. Um, is there anything else? Chris, is there anything else that you want to jump in and say before I open this up to questions? We have a pretty good block of time for questions or comments.
No, let's
Uh,
we do have quite a few questions here, so let's
okay,
jump in if that's okay.
sure.
We have a comment that you might want to read from Louise Moville, who points out you could have up to seven citizenships at once.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and then Louise
yeah.
goes on to ask, would the annual numbers not be affected by their eligibility to actually apply for citizenship after minimum 3 years? How would the numbers compare to the influxes of PRs 3 years earlier?
So hang on a second. Would the annual numbers not be affected by their eligibility? Yeah, they will be affected by the eligibility to actually apply for citizenship after minimum 3 years. How the numbers compare to influx of PRs 3 years earlier. So yeah, those are questions I'd have to, circle back to do more research on, to be fair. But yeah, they're certainly going to be affected by time lags, if you'd like, and processes. And I guess here I showed you a mix of things actually. So that mix of things suggests more research to be done to better understand some of these effects, but clearly they will be affected by those things. I mean, I've always thought in terms of the cuts that the government projected that we needed to take into account um, the process that was underway prior to the cuts, right? So you just couldn't turn around overnight and deal with applications that were either extensions or approvals or so forth. And so, okay, folks, well, I know you're approved, but we have to do some cuts. So, you're going to be your approval is going to be undone. So there is a process. There are time lags and adjustments are being made. And, I think we're seeing already in the PR numbers that those adjustments are being made quickly and unevenly, right? And so in Quebec, where I'm sitting, actually, in terms of PR admissions, things went virtually unchanged. Uh, so that disproportionately the PR cuts were greater in the rest of the country, right? That isn't about time lags, but still relevant. Uh, Even though what's interesting about it, by the way, is because I'm watching some of the conversation in Quebec from the outgoing premier and government discussion about how we absolutely need much more control over immigration and over the numbers and so forth, and a bit stumped because actually the numbers of PRs were not cut in Quebec. So unlike the rest of the country. So I find that all kind of odd. Anyway, thank you for that question. And as I said, it's good to uh, offer suggestions, like not just sort of so that in terms of what future research needs to be done, in terms of what future research or questions that we would want to put to IRCC, because I find IRCC, unlike many other countries I'm dealing with in terms of data access, is absolutely really high. I give them a very high rating if they'd send me one of those surveys, in terms of making data available and turning data around really quickly to make these opportunities available to us, which, we should try to take as much advantage of as possible to help Canadians get a much better handle or picture on what's going on, right? Because I'm come to the conclusion, excuse me for belaboring this, that a lot of the concern we have about narratives at least from many of you that I'm speaking with, and that the growing opposition we've seen in public opinion surveys, some of which we've conducted here, to immigration is a function of narrative problems with understanding the narrative or explaining the narrative. But I also think a lot of it is connected to immigration illiteracy, right? And that people just are often making statements. I wouldn't describe it as misinformation or disinformation necessarily. I just think it's more about not understanding the way things work when it comes to immigration in Canada. So anyway, sorry for that, but thank you for the question. Next, who are
Uh,
considered here as visible minorities in those regarding, sorry, here as visible minorities in those regarding having dual citizenship. So who are considered here as visible minorities? I mean, visible minorities, it's a census-based question, right? Uh, so I didn't track the dual citizens by visible minority status arising from the census. I did it by country of birth. So I'm not fully understanding that. I did have the data for that was the public opinion data by vis minority status, which is again, it's a census category, right? So it's the equivalent of racialized, which just simply means persons who don't define themselves as white in the census and actually don't, it's vis minorities and NVM, non-vis minorities in a lot of these public opinion surveys as opposed to the census, right? They'll unpack it differently. So they don't put white, they put not vis minority or vis minority. And then, under the vis minority status, I showed you Chinese and South Asian. They would have been under the vis minority status category, right? So those were subcategories within what the survey was referring to as vis minorities. Uh, okay, so sorry, Louise again. Was the survey on citizenship and loyalty only given to immigrant Canadian? No, it was not. No, that's why I had this. It said it was, again, I could send it to you, Louise, but it did say persons born in Canada, persons not born in Canada. There was an oversample in the survey of immigrants, so it got boosted a bit. But the loyalty issue say may be skewed depending on where the person answering the survey was born and raised in Canada or not. I don't know that it's skewed. So, but you can see when you look at the underlying variables, the underlying sort of the variables on immigrant, non-immigrant status, on vis minorities or not vis minorities, so that's certainly going to affect the overall provincial results, right? So next, did you search why young people don't want to have the Canadian citizenship because of lack of, those are questions we need to look into. I think I'd mentioned that along the way. It's a good question. One I think requires more research. I don't think they're saying they don't want to have Canadian citizenship explicitly. My understanding is they're saying that they'd rather, when you ask them, would you rather be citizens of Canada or any part of the world, they're saying no, but it doesn't mean they're rejecting Canadian citizenship. It just means they're maybe attracted to having citizenship in some other country. I guess that does sound kind of like they're rejecting, but we'd have to look into whether it's lack of jobs and opportunities, and and I think that's probably what I'll do in the fall, actually, when I do the survey before the conference in Niagara Falls. Right, I'll try to look into that issue a bit more and see what's driving it. The numbers for decline in preference to be a citizen. Oops, boy. The numbers for decline in preference to be a citizen by province can include temporary residents. No, they do not. Well, they would in that immigration category. Again, the survey is about 1,723 people, so it's 1,500. It's a national survey. It was boosted by with 200 immigrants, so we thicken it thickens the credibility of the response somewhat, given a higher number of immigrants in the survey. Not a huge panel of immigrants, mind you, but so do the numbers for decline in preference to be citizen. No, they wouldn't include a lot. Even if there were some temporary residents, there wouldn't be a lot. I'd like to see a difference of PR applicants and TR and permanent temporary per province, specifically for Quebec. Yeah, I mean, you can go online and do that. You can ask me to do it as well. I'd rather you, but I'll probably try to send you online if it's a detailed request, right? So for Quebec, that's not a detailed request. I can do that. So just send me an email, whoever you are, anonymous attendee, right? So, and actually send the email, not anonymous, with email. As a non-Canadian, I wonder why young Canadians are losing interest in their citizenship. Yeah, I wonder too, actually, what's driving some of that. And as I said, it's worth probing that further, and we'll do that. Tabitha Purell, thanks to you, Tabitha. That's very nice of you. You can hold as many citizenships as you'd like. Yes, I understand that most. Yes, Canada and most countries do. I personally hold 4. They're very nice. Yeah, you're one more than Elon Musk. I think he's got 3. But yes, good to know. I did actually initially have that in the description introduction that you could hold, more than 2 or whatever. But then I decided I don't want to confuse things, so let's stay with the sort of dual citizenship stuff, and that's it. Lori Wilkinson, always lovely to hear from you, Lori. Thanks for this very interesting analysis summary of their citizenship. No, thank you, Lori. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for being my friend, and thanks also for your amazing contribution to the immigration field, which is enriching and enriches me. So, what was the sample size for polling? 1,723. So Dan, thanks to that earlier question, I beat that one to the punch. It was 1,723. Most national surveys are web-based, by the way, so it's a non-probability sample. They're 1,500 or thereabouts. I boosted it with a couple hundred, a little more than a couple hundred immigrants, just to, as I said, thicken that result a bit. But optimally, you want to boost it further and you want to be able to it would be great to do a sample of immigrants. It's available actually through some platforms. Leger has a platform like that. We actually were the spearheading partner and instigator in them creating a panel of immigrants because we want to create a go-to panel for immigrants, but it ended up being a Leger product, and so that we can access. But yeah, so that's it. So as I said, optimally, you'd have a much bigger sample of immigrants that you could query on this and be able to break it down by either source country or ethnic identification. So it would be interesting as well to look at how second generation, the children of immigrants feel, right? So, in the country right now, you'll see when the 2026 census comes out, which will be next year, actually, that the results will be presented. The census itself will be done in May. You'll see, again, a big upswing in the percentage cumulatively of first and second generation Canadians, right? So probably close to over 45, between 45 and 50% of the country will be first and second generation. And it will be interesting to see how the second generation feels sort of about some of the questions here on citizenship. That's not going to come out in the census. We'd have to do that in a separate panel because they don't, census doesn't ask questions about attachment to Canada, although they have general social surveys that may in future ask such questions about Canadian identity. So, and which have a good block of second generation respondents. Timothy, yes, interesting insight about immigration literacy. Can you expand on this a bit? Has many research in this area. We've done by expanding. I just, when I just conversationally, when I hear from a lot of people about, the pathway to getting into the country, the process of citizenship, permanent residency, a whole range of things, all the acronyms that people don't know or understand when it comes to immigration. I feel that, in a country like this, which has globally a very important percentage of its population that's immigrant, that it'd be good to sort of create more knowledge. And I've been sort of toying with this idea of creating a course on immigration for high school students. I know it's built into social studies programs, immigration issues, but a course that's really directed at immigration in Canada, its history, its demographic importance, and so forth, how we've evolved with immigration. That's tailored to high schools and go to the ministers of education of Canada and try to advocate for the introduction of a course on immigration that's a high school based course. I've actually created something like this and, a template for it. But I'm sort of, but this happens to me. I get an idea. I sort of jump in the idea and, and then I don't, there's so many things and ideas that I need to really stay with it. And I hope I stay with this one because I think it's very important, but it sounds like it'd be a tremendous degree of hard work to convince our educational ministries across the country to undertake such a thing. But I think for the future, it's extremely important. And just to Timothy, to circle back, we've done some polling to ask Canadians questions about immigration, about its history, about ask them to estimate the numbers of immigrants coming to the country, and a variety of other things. And knowledge wasn't especially high, to be fair. It was so a lot of people are just not in the know. So very often when you ask people, there are too many immigrants, about the right number, or not enough. If you ask them the actual numbers, they don't necessarily know them. And so IRCC will do those types of surveys, and they'll ask about how many immigrants are there too many, about the right number, or not enough? And then they'll give you the numbers after, and then re-ask the question to see. But we're not going into it with knowledge about it necessarily. So that's my point there. And that's just a small issue. There are so many other issues that I think are, part of what could be a corpus for helping people understand more about immigration in the country. So, maybe a better way to approach it is to say enhancing literacy or knowledge about immigration instead of combating immigration illiteracy. Because I don't think people like the illiteracy issue because I've been talking about how to frame such a project, and more people were on the side of thickening or enhancing knowledge about immigration, and that's also the whole range of underlying issues about refugees, about family unification. There's tremendous lack of awareness when it comes to refugee issues in this country and the history of refugees in the country. Tremendously low understanding or knowledge. Okay. Thank you for the no, thank you for that comment. Why do you think people don't want to be any more Canadian citizens? Yeah, as I said, we need to research that question further because generally most of the polls have shown a high percentage of people wanting to be Canadian citizens. Certainly, what's interesting about that is a ton of people want to come to the country, right? As you can see, there's still very high interest in coming here. Although I think the word's getting out that it's harder to get here, right? Than and with the reductions and so forth. I mean, it's never been simple to get here, to be fair. A lot of people, I think, abroad thought it was. And clearly, the international mobility program, you know, with those open work permits gave the impression that there were many pathways to come here. And clearly, with respect to the students, where we've seen massive cutbacks, there was messaging uh, around 2020 and prior saying, hey, come study here and we want you to stay on after that. So that's sort of reverse course on that messaging. But I guess it all contributes to and plus the many phone calls I get from friends and so forth. Can you help a friend of mine who's trying to stay? Which of course I can't help them, right? Because that would require me making calls to people in government, which I'm not going to do. But it shows you that I noticed in a lot of those calls a lot of confusion about pathways to get here, and I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this thing as well. So that's it. Yasmin Martinez, why do you think young people? Yeah. So that's Yasmin. We need to do more research in that area. So agreed. Immigration literacy greatly affects the narrative. I totally agree with you, Louise. I think people of personal experience with immigrants have a better understanding. I do too, actually, empathy, and are more encouraging of immigration in general. Yeah, yes and no on the last part. I'm noticing in my polling that there seems to be this pushback. A lot of people who are now here are also kind of pushing back on other people who they have the impression are not getting here or coming here through the same type of pathway that those people. It's another to say it another way. I'm noticing this in surveys. It kind of surprises me sometimes. People say, "Look, I came here the right way. I did this the right way," and a lot of people are not coming here the right way. So we're seeing some of that pushback, and that's why I think that literacy piece is so important, right? So because this thing is a lot more complex. And I'm noticing it increasingly in surveys that I'm doing. Where I've been really surprised actually, and usually I'm not surprised by these survey results. I tend to be able to think I can predict a lot of because I've seen so much of this survey work in the last 25, 30 years that, I'm pretty good at saying, here's the question, here's probably what's going to happen when we get the results. But lately I'm in this field, I'm more challenged by it. So, because yeah, things are just a lot more, Louise, a lot more complex out there in terms of public opinion. And as I speak to people in communities too, they're sort of, uh, it's not as though everyone's particular community necessarily is saying all these people from this community you know, are people we should welcome because we're from the same community. It's just things have gotten a lot more complex, and the student thing, that's also a lot more complex, than uh, like I can't, and I've got to give this some more thought. And with all due respect to anyone on the call here from universities, uh, some of the colleges and actually in some universities, even though the people I speak to universities push the whole challenge or problem on the colleges, have not been the best actors on some of the international student admission issues and the response of now we need to raise domestic tuition fees because you've sort of curtailed our access to all those international students. It's just not a good line through this thing. So it needs more thought. And actually, I feel, but I'll be retired long before we get to this place, and that we need to have a conversation that includes the university decision makers and the business community and the settlement sector, as opposed to operating sometimes too much in silos. Because Canadians see this as a holistically. They don't see it in the same pieces in pieces that it's often presented as. Merci pour ce présent de données fort intéressant. Merci à vous, Dora. C'est fort apprécié et c'est avec grand plaisir que je partage ces données et toutes ces conversations qui m'alimentent beaucoup que je suis privilégié d'avoir accès avec vous. Thank you, Jack, for all that you do. Oh, thank you for all that you do also, everybody. I find
Jack,
President very informative, useful, and most of all, research-based. Keep up the good work. Oh, I'm reading about the good work. It's nice to read about the good work yourself. But thank you, all of you, for all the great work you do, and look forward to seeing you in Niagara Falls, if not before, and perhaps in India. Who knows? Oh, there are more questions, but Chris, I think try to copy the questions because we're at 1 p.m. I want to let people go for lunch, and I'll try to respond in writing to the extent that it'll be hard on the anonymous attendee question, but the other ones I'll try to respond in writing. But if someone else has a question, feel free to email me at christopher.surtees@acs-aec.ca.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem, Chris. All right,
Yep. Should we wrap up?
we're wrapping up. We're losing numbers. They're dropping.